Time to check in with Chris Dimakos, our CJAD 800 legal contributor. And Chris, it's that time of the year, so there are a ton of questions about office Christmas parties, holiday parties that will be going on. You know, your note is interesting. I hadn't even thought of this, but pre-COVID, this was just something that happened all the time every year. It was okay. We did things, and then COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, these things kind of went away because they were forced to go away. Now you have a lot of employees working remotely. So what do employers try to do? They try to boost morale, try to bring everyone together for a party. And we know how potentially problematic that can be. So let's start with one. First of all, to your first point, if an employee gets drunk and verbally insults another coworker, is the employer on the hook for damages, or can employers limit their responsibility? So we're starting easy with just insults. Where does this go?
Yeah. So basically, when you have these holiday office parties, in the past we've had employees who might not have gotten along during the year, and then you add a little alcohol and some loud music, and all of a sudden they have these flare-ups at the office parties. And employers have tried, although they failed when it got to court, they tried to limit the responsibility by saying, you know, they came, it was a social function, they're being themselves. You know, it's not a work function because it's not on work property, but the courts have time and time again said if it was organized by work, if all the employees were there for a work party, the employer is on the hook. Oh. And that's why employers now have taken measures to try and limit the amount of alcohol being served. They send out memos about conduct. They do whatever they can to try and reduce the risk of having somebody act out during these holiday parties. But I can tell you from experience, they often fail because people, they have a lot of stress, and when they get to these things, a lot of people decide to let loose, and things happen that they regret, obviously, but the employer ultimately is on the hook if something happens between two employees.
So we know if we go back a while, right? I mean, a long time ago, because I still remember, when employers were handing out taxi chits to take them off the hook in case someone got drunk. I imagine they still do that. But I guess one of the other questions is, if you're an employer, right, and you understand that these are potential issues you might be dealing with, can you somehow limit your liability? Like, can you send out an email saying, hey, come at your own risk? Or does that not absolve you of anything?
They tried, and it helps because it is a deterrent, and some people do respect that. But ultimately, if something goes wrong, it's still considered a work function. And whenever an employee is harassed or is hit or verbally assaulted, whatever the case is, it's the employer that's on the hook for that because they're the ones that held this function. Some employers have just said, we're not doing this anymore.
Right.
Everyone can go out on their own and with their families, and we're not doing anything. But for the employers that have continued to try and boost morale and bring everyone under the same roof, yes, you're right. They offer taxi chips. Now they even limit the number of drinks you can have. They say, we're going to pay for 1 or 2 drinks. That's all you're allowed to have all night. If you go and try and, get extra tickets, well, that's something that's against company policy. And if you get drunk at a work function, you can get reprimanded. You can get disciplined, sometimes even fired if the conduct deserves it and merits it. So, listen, there's no question that remote work has had employers. One bad thing about remote work is employee morale is not there. There's no sense of belongingness to a team. It's really difficult to get everyone to feel part of something special when you're all working from home, remote. So they want to promote these parties, but at the same time, they're very cautious. They don't want to have lawsuits on their hands and complaints and having to fill out paperwork about what took place and what they did to stop these things. It's not something they want to do. So they're in a difficult situation. And like I said, the more stress there is, and the more overworked and people want to let loose, the higher likelihood that you're going to have some issues at these parties.
So let me take it outside of the party. Let's say you get to the situation where someone is at the party, they leave the party, and damage is caused outside of the party. So not there at that moment, but later on that person's getting home. Maybe they've had too much to drink, we don't know yet, and they get involved in an accident, they cause damage, then what?
Yeah, so that's a great question because not only does that happen at works, but some people like to host parties, their own personal parties at their house. And they're like, hey, come over, have a good time. And some people might drink too much, leave, and then cause damage. They might run into someone's home or they might knock over someone's sign. And the question is, are the hosts liable for that, whether it's an employer or just a friend having friends over? Are you liable for the conduct of somebody who leaves your party drunk? And the courts have looked at this often and said, if you're an employer and you have an employee who leaves your place drunk, you can be on the hook for them, okay? Now, you can try and say, we did everything we could in our power to stop them from leaving drunk. We monitored their drinks. It was impossible for us to monitor how many drinks they had. We gave them 2 drink tickets. So employers can try and say, we were as diligent as possible. There's nothing else we could have done. But know that you can be on the hook if that happens. And when it comes to personal parties, Aaron, if you host people over the holidays and they leave your home drunk, what the courts have said is it's a little bit different. They said, if you do something to make or to entice people to drink, if you have drinking games, if you supply alcohol and you tell everyone, hey, have another drink, have another drink. If you promote it, well, then you can be on the hook for it. But if you don't, a social host like yourself doesn't have the same type of responsibility that an employer would have at their function. So they make that distinction. The courts say, you know what, if you're opening up your home, your personal home, and someone decides to drink too much, that's on them. We're not going to hold the homeowner responsible for that. But that's a little different if you're an employer.
But that's it, which kind of makes me want to ask at that point. So the idea, if you go to a bar, right, and the bartender's there, he's serving the drinks, he's cut you off, and you go and you have an accident. Didn't courts rule a while ago, bartenders, I mean, the bars are still responsible for having done this or not?
Right, yeah, so the courts, they look at that. And what the courts have said was the bars, just like an employer, have a responsibility to understand how many drinks someone has had and whether or not they leave drunk. Now, ultimately, if the bar themselves weren't negligent, if they can show, we monitored them, they had drinks, but they didn't do so with one particular bartender. It was impossible for us to know how many drinks they've had. Then the bar owners can present a defense. But there's no question that we've seen commercial establishments be on the hook for attendees who have left drunk, and the root of the responsibility was you should have known, based on how many drinks you served this individual, that they were going to leave drunk. So again, a nice distinction between personal home parties at your house versus commercial establishments and employers. You have to show that you're diligent. You have to show that you didn't promote excessive drinking.
And that's where we leave it. Hey, Chris, have a happy holiday season.
Yeah, and I didn't get the invite for your holiday party, so I'll be waiting for that in my
I'm just waiting for the alcohol permit to come through. As soon as I get that, you're in. Don't worry. Chris Dimakos.
All right,
thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks a lot.